The bakery, Riley's hearth, was more than just a business. It was the physical manifestation of every dream I'd ever had. Usually, at 11 o'clock at night, the air inside was a comforting sanctuary that smelled like yeast rising, vanilla bean, and the earthy, toasted scent of grains. It was the only place where I felt truly in control. I was alone in the kitchen, my arms dusted in white flour as I worked the sourdough for the morning rush. I loved the silence of the night, until that silence was punctured by the sound of the front door clicking shut. I frowned, wiping my hands on my apron. Beau was supposed to be at home, asleep. I moved toward the swinging doors that separated the kitchen from the retail space, peering through the small, circular glass portal. My heart did a slow, painful roll in my chest. My husband wasn't alone. He was standing by the mahogany display cases with Vanessa, the high-gloss realtor who had handled our commercial lease. She wasn't just standing near him, she was draped over him, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. In her other hand, she held a red plastic jerrycan. The sharp, acrid scent of gasoline began to seep under the door, choking out the smell of my cinnamon rolls. "Are you absolutely sure about the timer on the back oven?" Vanessa asked, her voice a low, melodic purr that made my skin crawl. "I've set it to short circuit in 20 minutes, Beau said, his voice sounding colder than I'd ever heard it. He looked around my shop not with affection, but with a calculating greed. "The wiring in this old building is a mess anyway. The fire department won't find a thing. It'll look like an electrical fault. One massive blaze, and we walk away with a $2 million insurance settlement." I felt as though I had been doused in ice water. They were going to burn it down. Everything I had worked for every late night and early morning was being reduced to an insurance payout. "And Riley?" Vanessa asked, tilting her head toward the kitchen. "She's still in the back. What if she gets out?" Beau didn't even hesitate. His face remained a mask of indifference. "The heavy steel exit in the back is deadbolt from the outside. I did it before we walked in. By the time she even smells the smoke, the front will be a wall of fire. It's cleaner this way, Vanessa. No messy divorce, no splitting the assets. Just a tragic accident involving a hardworking baker." "You're a monster, Beau." Vanessa laughed, but she didn't sound disgusted. She sounded impressed. She leaned in and kissed him, a deep, lingering kiss while they stood in the puddles of gasoline they were pouring onto my hand-scraped hardwood floors. The betrayal was a physical blow, sharper than any knife. My lungs felt tight, not from smoke yet, but from the sheer weight of his cruelty. I turned and ran for the back door, throwing my weight against it, but the handle wouldn't budge. He hadn't been lying. I was trapped in my own dream, and it was about to become my pyre. I heard the heavy thud of the jerrycan being dropped, followed by the terrifying whoosh of an accelerant catching fire. A line of orange light crawled under the kitchen door. The heat was instantaneous, a roaring beast that began to consume the oxygen. I hammered on the steel door until my knuckles bled, screaming for help that wouldn't come. As the black smoke began to fill the room, stinging my eyes and charring my throat, I slumped to the floor. My last thought wasn't about the money or the shop. It was the realization that I had spent 5 years loving a man who was currently watching me die for a check. Everything went black. I woke up with a gasp so violent it felt like a physical blow to my solar plexus. My hands flew to my throat, clawing at my skin, searching for the burns, the char, the suffocating weight of the black smoke. I expected to feel the searing heat of the kitchen and hear the roar of the flames devouring my life's work. Instead, the air was cool and smelled faintly of lavender laundry detergent. I lay there, my heart thudding against my ribs like a frantic bird hitting the bars of a cage. My vision was blurry, adjusting to the dim, gray light of early morning filtering through the Venetian blinds. I wasn't on the floor of the bakery. I was in my bed. Our bed. I turned my head slowly, my neck stiff with a phantom tension. Beside me, Beau was snoring softly. He looked peaceful, his golden hair messy against the white pillowcase, the very picture of a devoted, hard-working husband. The sight of him made my stomach turn a violent somersault. This was the man who, just moments ago in my memory, had stood over a puddle of gasoline and called my death cleaner. It wasn't a dream, I whispered, my voice a ragged thread. It couldn't have been. The smell of the gasoline was still etched into my sinuses. The sound of his voice, that cold, calculating tone, was vibrating in my ears. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers trembling so hard I nearly knocked it to the floor. I tapped the screen. 4:30 a.m. Monday, October 12th. My breath hitched. Monday. The fire happened on Sunday night. I had been sent back exactly 7 days. I had 1 week to live or 1 week to make sure he never saw a cent of that insurance money. Riley? You okay, babe? Beau mumbled, shifting under the duvet. He didn't open his eyes, but he reached out, his hand sliding across the mattress to find my leg. You're shaking the bed. Had another nightmare? I flinched, as if his touch were a brand. I scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over my slippers. I'm fine. I managed to choke out. I stood in the center of the room, hugging myself, trying to stop the tremors. Just a bad dream. I'm going to go start the coffee. Go back to sleep, honey, Beau said, his voice thick with a fake, honeyed concern that now made my skin crawl. You've been pushing yourself too hard at the shop. You need your rest if you're going to finish that big wedding cake this weekend. The wedding cake. The excuse to keep me late on Sunday. He was already setting the stage. I can't sleep, I said, backing toward the door. I needed to get away from him before I screamed. I fled to the kitchen, leaning against the cold granite counter until the nausea passed. I stared at the coffee maker, watching the dark liquid drip into the pot. Every mundane detail of our house, the framed wedding photos on the wall, the home sweet home sign I'd bought at a craft fair, now looked like props in a horror movie. I looked at a photo of us on the mantel. We were on the beach, laughing, his arm around my shoulder. I searched his eyes in the picture, looking for the monster, but he was a master of disguise. He had played the part of the doting husband so well that I had handed him the keys to my life. You won't get it, I hissed at the photograph. You won't get the money, and you won't get the girl. The terror was still there, a cold lump in my throat, but beneath it, a new heat was rising. It wasn't the heat of the fire. It was the slow, steady burn of rage. I had 7 days to turn the hunter into the prey. I didn't just need to survive. I needed to document his betrayal so thoroughly that there would be no shadow of a doubt. I needed help. I needed someone who had never trusted Beau, someone who would believe the impossible. I needed Jesse. I grabbed my keys and my coat. I didn't care if it was 5 a.m. I was done being the victim. This time I was going to be the one who lit the fuse. The drive to the outskirts of town was a blur of gray mist and frantic thoughts. I didn't head toward the bakery. I couldn't bear to stand under its roof quite yet. Instead, I drove to a dusty gravel lot bordered by stacks of weathered lumber and heavy machinery. This was Jesse's world, a place that smelled of fresh-cut cedar, diesel, and honesty. Jesse was already there, his massive silhouette framed by the orange glow of his workshop's interior lights. He was loading a heavy miter saw into the back of his truck, his movements steady and powerful. He had been my best friend since we were 5 years old. He was the boy who had shared his juice box when I dropped mine, and the man who had built every custom shelf in my bakery with obsessive care. He was also the only person in this town who had never once smiled back at Beau. I pulled my car to a stop, the gravel crunching loudly in the quiet morning. Before I could even turn off the engine, Jesse had stopped working. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped toward me, his brow furrowed with immediate concern. Riley, he called out, his voice a deep, grounding rumble. What are you doing here at 5 a.m? You look like you've been running from a ghost. I stepped out of the car, my legs feeling like they were made of water. The moment my feet hit the dirt, the stoic mask I'd tried to wear since waking up shattered. I didn't even realize I was crying until Jesse was in front of me, his large, calloused hands gripping my shoulders to steady me. Riley, talk to me, Jesse said, his tone dropping into that protective register he only ever used for me. Did he touch you? Did Beau do something? He's going to kill me, Jesse, I whispered, the words finally tumbling out into the cold air. He's sleeping with Vanessa, the realtor. They're going to burn the bakery for the insurance money this Sunday night. They're going to lock me inside. Jesse didn't pull away. He didn't tell me I was being dramatic or that I'd had a vivid nightmare. He just tightened his grip on my shoulders, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me feel seen for the first time in years. "I told you that guy was a snake from the moment you brought him home," Jesse said, his jaw tightening so hard I heard his teeth grind. "I saw the way he looked at your shop, like it was an ATM, not your dream. But you loved him, Riley." So I kept my mouth shut and watched from the sidelines. "I was so stupid," I sobbed, leaning my forehead against his chest. He smelled like sawdust and safety. I worked myself to the bone for a man who was calculating the cost of my funeral. "You weren't stupid. You were loyal," Jesse corrected, his voice softening as he wrapped his arms around me. "But the loyalty ends today. If he wants a fire, we'll give him one, just not the kind he's expecting. I told you years ago I'd never let anything happen to you, and I meant it. I'll be the one to bury him, Riley. I promise you that." He pulled back, wiping a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "Now, listen to me. We have 6 days. I have a crate of high-end, fireproof thermal cameras in the shop, the kind that stream to a hidden cloud server he can't touch. I'm going to install them tonight while he thinks you're sleeping. We're going to catch every word, every drop of gasoline, and every look they share." "I have to go back there, Jesse," I said, a shiver running through me. "I have to pretend I don't know." "You're the best actor I know, Riley," Jesse said, giving me a small, grim smile. "Just remember, he's not your husband anymore. He's just a target. And I'm right behind you." Walking back into our house felt like stepping into a lion's den, only the lion was wearing a wedding ring and offering me a cup of lukewarm coffee. I had to stop in the driveway for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, practicing the slow, deep breaths Jesse had taught me. "Smile, Riley. Be the girl he thinks he can kill." When I opened the front door, Beau was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, his expression unreadable for a split second before the loving husband mask snapped into place. "You're back early," he said, setting his phone face down. "I thought you were going to the wholesale market?" "I changed my mind," I said, forcefully brightening my voice. I walked over and kissed his cheek, a move that made my stomach churn with a violent, acidic revolt. I decided to swing by the park and clear my head. The morning air was so crisp, I just couldn't resist. "You're getting sentimental on me, Ree," Beau said with a light laugh, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch felt like a centipede crawling across my skin. "But you're right. It's a beautiful week. A week for new beginnings." I turned away to start breakfast, hiding the tremor in my hands. New beginnings. He meant my end. I cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzling sound mimicking the static in my brain. I played my part perfectly, complaining about the price of flour and asking him if he liked the new curtains I was thinking about ordering. I watched him eat, marveling at how a human being could chew toast and sip orange juice while planning a homicide. By 10 o'clock, I was at the bakery. The bell above the door chimed, and for a moment, I expected to see Jesse. Instead, it was Vanessa. She walked in wearing a power suit that probably cost more than my first car, her heels clicking like a countdown on the hardwood floor. "Riley, darling," she exclaimed, her voice vibrating with a fake, high-pitched energy. I was just in the neighborhood. I wanted to see how the heart of the town was beating. "Vanessa," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "What a surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Oh, just checking in," she said, her eyes scanning the ceiling, the corners, the old wiring. She wasn't looking at the bread. She was measuring the fuel. "Beau mentioned you were thinking about an upgrade to the storage area upstairs. I'd love to take some photos later this week for the insurance valuation. You know, just in case anything unexpected ever happened." "That's very thorough of you," I said, leaning over the counter. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could see it through my shirt. "You and Beau really do think of everything, don't you?" She gave me a sharp, cat-like smile. "We try." After she left, the silence of the bakery felt heavy. I waited until the late-night shift was over and the shop was empty. Jesse arrived at midnight, a shadow among shadows. He didn't say a word as he pulled a duffel bag from his truck. I watched him move with a silent, surgical precision. He climbed a ladder, tucking tiny, pinhole lenses into the decorative crown molding and behind the vent hoods in the kitchen. "These are synced to a private server," Jesse whispered, hopping down from the ladder. He showed me his tablet. The bakery was rendered in high-definition infrared, every corner visible. Even if the power goes out, these have an internal battery. They'll catch everything, Riley. Every drop of gas. Every match. "He's going to be here Sunday," I whispered, looking at the screen. "And so will I," Jesse said, stepping close to me. He took my hand, his palm warm and solid. "You just have to keep the mask on for 3 more days."
Can you do that? For you?
"I can do anything," I said. I wasn't sure if I meant it as a friend or something more, but in that moment, Jesse was the only thing standing between me and the fire. By Friday evening, the air in our house had become so heavy I felt like I was moving through waist-deep water. Every time Beau laughed at a joke on TV or asked me how my day was, a high-pitched ringing started in my ears. I was vibrating with the effort of not screaming, of not grabbing the kitchen knife, and demanding to know how he could look at me and see nothing but a pile of ash. I told Beau I had to run back to the shop to check on the refrigeration, a lie I'd used 3 times this week. Instead, I drove to the darkened park where Jesse was waiting in his truck, the blue light of a laptop illuminating his sharp features. "I pulled the footage from the office camera," Jesse said as I climbed into the passenger seat. His voice was tight, his hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. "You need to see this, Riley. But you need to be ready." I took a shaky breath and looked at the screen. The footage was from yesterday afternoon, while I had been out at the bank. The infrared view showed the back office of the bakery. Beau was there, sitting in my chair, but Vanessa was perched on the desk, her legs swinging. "The policy is active," Vanessa said on the recording, her voice tinny but clear. "I confirmed with the agent today. If the whole structure goes, the payout is immediate. $2 million for the building and equipment, plus the life insurance rider you took out on her last month." I felt the blood drain from my face. A life insurance rider. He hadn't just wanted the shop. He'd doubled down on my death. "She's been acting strange lately." Beau's voice came through the speakers. He sounded annoyed, like I was a difficult chore he was tired of doing. "Jumpy. I think she's just stressed about the wedding cake. She's always been high-strung. It makes her easier to manage." "Just 3 more days, Beau," Vanessa whispered, leaning down to kiss him. "Then we're in the clear. No more flour, no more small-town gossip. Just us and the money." Jesse slammed the laptop shut. The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm going to kill him," Jesse hissed, his eyes fixed on the windshield. "Riley, I can't let you go back there. Not after hearing that. We have enough. We can go to the police now." "No," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears, cold, hard, and final. "If we go now, they'll get a good lawyer. They'll say it was just talk or a fantasy. We need them with the gas in their hands. We need them to light the match. I want the world to see them exactly as they are." "Riley," Jesse started, reaching out to take my hand. "I'm okay, Jesse." I lied, though I felt like I was shattering into a million pieces. "I just need you to be ready on Sunday. Don't let the fire take the whole shop. And don't let them get away." When I got home that night, Beau was waiting up for me. He had poured 2 glasses of wine and lit a candle on the coffee table. He looked like the perfect husband. "There she is," he said, smiling that bright, empty smile. "You look exhausted, honey. Why don't you come sit down? I want to toast to us. To our future." I looked at the wine glass he offered. I wondered if he'd put something in it. I wondered if he was testing the manageable girl one last time. I took the glass, my fingers brushing his, and forced a smile that felt like it was breaking my face. "To the future," I said, the words tasting like poison. "May it be exactly what we deserve." I didn't drink. I just watched him over the rim of the glass, counting the seconds until Sunday. I was no longer the girl who was going to die in a fire. I was the one who was going to watch him burn in a prison cell. The sun rose on Sunday morning like a pale, mocking eye peering through the bedroom curtains. I lay perfectly still, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, counting the steady, rhythmic breaths of the man sleeping beside me.
Today was the day.
In the first timeline, today was the last time I had ever felt the sun on my skin. "Big day, honey," Beau said, his voice startlingly clear as he rolled over. He wasn't asleep anymore. He was watching me with a look that he probably thought was affection, but I now recognized as the gaze of a man evaluating a piece of property before a demolition. "I have a lot to do," I said, sitting up and pulling the duvet tight around my chest. "The wedding cake is 3 tiers, and the fondant is being finicky. I'll likely be there until midnight." "Don't push yourself too hard," Beau said, reaching out to stroke my hair. I felt a chill race down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. "But I understand. You've always been such a perfectionist. Why don't I bring you some dinner later tonight? Around 10? "That would be lovely, Beau," I said, forcing a small, tired smile. 10 o'clock. He was checking the timeline. He wanted to make sure I was still in the building before he and Vanessa arrived with the gasoline. I spent the morning at the bakery, but for every hour I spent kneading dough, I spent 10 minutes moving my life out the back door. My grandmother's handwritten recipe books, the original deed to the shop, and the folder containing my birth certificate were already tucked safely in the hidden compartment of Jesse's truck. Around noon, Jesse pulled up to the loading dock. He didn't come in the front. He moved with a quiet, lethal efficiency, carrying a large, heavy duffel bag. We met in the storage room, the air thick with the smell of flour and the electric hum of the walk-in cooler. "Is the mannequin ready?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "In the back of the van," Jesse said. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed with a worry that he couldn't quite hide. He walked over to the main control panel for the building's old sprinkler system. "I've finished the override. The local alarm won't trigger until the heat reaches a certain point, but it'll alert my phone and the chief's unit the second the thermal cameras detect a flame." "And the cameras?" I asked. "Active and recording," Jesse said. He stepped closer, his presence a solid, grounding force in the middle of my crumbling world. He took my hands in his grip warm and steady. "Riley, I don't like you being here alone this afternoon. What if he comes early?" "He won't," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. "He's too arrogant. He thinks he's playing me perfectly. He wants to catch me exhausted and sleeping over my work." "I'll be in the alleyway behind the hardware store starting at 9, Jesse said, his jaw tightening. "The second they walk in that front door, I'm moving. You stay by the back exit, Riley. Do you hear me? The second you see them on your phone, you get out. Don't wait for the match." "I hear you, Jesse," I said. "I told you that guy was bad news," Jesse said, his voice dropping into a low, pained rumble. "But I never thought he'd be this kind of evil. I'm going to be the one to bury him, Riley. I promise you that." The afternoon crawled by. I iced the wedding cake with mechanical precision, my eyes constantly darting to the clock. Every chime of the bell above the door made my heart leap into my throat. At 8 p.m., I sent my last employee home. At 9 p.m., I turned off the main lights, leaving only the soft, golden glow of the kitchen lamps. I looked at the mannequin Jessie had helped me dress in my spare apron and cap. From a distance, in the dim light and through the steam of the ovens, it looked exactly like a woman slumped over her prep table, defeated by a long day. I checked the app on my phone. The infrared feed was crystal clear. The bakery was a tomb of shadows, waiting for its desecrators. I moved to the back steel door, my hand resting on the heavy deadbolt I had secretly oiled so it wouldn't make a sound. Now, all I had to do was wait for the man I had once loved to show up and try to kill me. The silence in the back of the bakery was absolute, save for the rhythmic, mechanical ticking of the cooling bread racks. I sat in the darkness of the narrow hallway by the loading dock, the only light coming from the glowing screen of my phone. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. On the screen, the infrared feed showed the front of the shop, a world of gray and white shadows, waiting for the spark that would turn it all to ash. At 10:45 p.m., a pair of headlights swept across the front windows. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, jagged beat. The front door clicked open. Beau stepped in first, followed closely by Vanessa. They weren't wearing masks. They didn't look like criminals. They looked like a couple coming home from a late dinner. Beau carried the red plastic jerrycan with a casual, terrifying ease. "She's in the back," Beau said, his voice dropping to a low, cold whisper that carried perfectly through the hidden microphones Jesse had installed. He pointed toward the kitchen, where the silhouette of the mannequin was visible through the glass door. "Looks like she finally passed out over that damn cake." "Perfect," Vanessa said, her voice sharp and eager. She walked to the center of the hardwood floor, her heels clicking, a sound that usually meant business, but tonight meant murder. "Let's get this over with. The smell of this place always gives me a headache." I watched, bile rising in my throat, as my husband began to unscrew the cap of the gas can. He started at the front door, walking in a slow, deliberate circle. The liquid splashed onto the floor, the sound a wet, heavy slap that felt like it was hitting my own skin. "Make sure you get the display cases," Vanessa said, leaning against the counter. "I want to make sure the structural damage is total. No restoration possible." "I know how to do my job, Vanessa," Beau said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He moved toward the kitchen door, splashing the last of the gasoline right up to the threshold where he thought I was sleeping. "She'll never even wake up. The fumes will take her before the heat does." "You almost sound like you're doing her a favor," Vanessa laughed, a high, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "I am," Beau replied. "I'm ending a marriage that should have died years ago. This way, everyone wins. I get the money, you get me, and Riley gets to be a local legend. The dedicated baker, who died for her craft." He pulled a silver lighter from his pocket. My breath caught in my throat. This was the moment. In my memory, this was where the world ended. But this time, I was the one holding the evidence. I watched the tiny flame flicker on the screen. "Ready?" Beau asked. "Do it," Vanessa said. He dropped the lighter. The whoosh was instantaneous, a roaring wall of orange and yellow that erupted across the infrared screen. The thermal sensor spiked, the image blooming into a blinding white. "Go." "Out the back," Beau hissed. They turned to run toward the loading dock, my hiding spot. I didn't wait. I threw the heavy deadbolt open and stepped out into the cool night air of the alleyway. I didn't run away. I stood my ground. Seconds later, the door burst open. Beau and Vanessa stumbled out, coughing from the first tendrils of smoke, expecting to find an empty alley and a clear getaway. Instead, they found me. "Riley." Beau gasped, his face turning a sickly, translucent white in the moonlight. He looked at me, then back at the smoke billowing from the door, his brain struggling to reconcile the corpse in the kitchen with the woman standing in front of him. "You missed a spot, Beau," I said, my voice as cold as the steel door behind me. "Riley, honey, the bakery. It's on fire. I came to save you," he shouted, his voice instantly shifting back into that practiced, frantic lie. He moved toward me, his hands outstretched. I tried to get in the front, but— "Stop," I said, holding on my phone. The screen was still live, showing the footage of him pouring the gas just seconds ago. "Jesse now." From the shadows of the neighboring hardware store, the world turned blue and red. Chief Miller's cruiser skidded into the alley, tires screaming, while Jesse emerged from behind a stack of lumber, a fire extinguisher in one hand and a heavy iron crowbar in the other. He didn't look at the fire. He looked at Beau with a primal, lethal promise in his eyes. "I told you I'd be the one to bury him, Riley," Jesse said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble as the police swarmed the alley. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers danced across the brick walls of the alley, turning the scene into a jagged, surreal nightmare. Beau was pressed against the cold metal of a dumpster, his hands zip-tied behind his back, while Vanessa sat on the curb, her expensive suit ruined and her face a mask of hysterical tears. "Riley, you have to listen to me," Beau shouted, his voice cracking as he looked at the smoke still curling from the bakery door. It was Vanessa. She blackmailed me. She said she'd ruin my reputation if I didn't help her with the insurance. You're pathetic, Beau. Vanessa shrieked, her head snapping toward him. It was your idea. You were the one who said she was worth more dead than alive. I have the text to prove it. I stood there, watching them tear each other apart like starving dogs. It was almost funny. The perfect couple didn't even last 5 minutes under the pressure of a pair of handcuffs. I don't need the texts, Vanessa, I said, stepping forward so the light hit the screen of my tablet. I hit play on the recording. The audio of Beau saying, "I'm ending a marriage that should have died years ago," echoed through the alley, loud and clear. Beau's face went from pale to a ghostly, translucent white. He stopped fighting the officer and slumped against the dumpster, the weight of his own words finally crushing him. Chief Miller has the high-definition footage of the entire night, I said, my voice steady. The cameras were fireproof. Every drop of gasoline, every match flicked, it's all on the cloud. You didn't just fail to kill me, Beau. You filmed your own conviction. Chief Miller stepped up, tipped his hat to me, and gestured to his officers. Get them out of here, he said. As they were loaded into the back of separate cruisers, Jesse stepped out of the bakery, his face covered in soot but his eyes bright with victory. He was holding the fire extinguisher like a trophy. The sprinklers did most of the work, Jesse said, walking over to me. The damage is minimal. A few floorboards and some smoke cleanup, but the structure is sound. Your dream is still standing, Riley. Because of you, I whispered, finally letting the adrenaline fade. I felt a sudden, bone-deep exhaustion. I don't know what I would have done without you, Jesse. You would have found a way, he said, reaching out to tuck a stray hair behind my ear. His thumb lingered on my cheek, his touch warm and real. But I'm glad you didn't have to. 6 months later, the bakery didn't just survive, it thrived. After the trial, where the video evidence was so damning the jury only deliberated for 20 minutes, the town rallied around me. Beau and Vanessa were sentenced to 20 years for attempted murder and arson. I stood in front of the shop on a crisp Monday morning, looking up at the new sign. It was hand-carved cedar, built by Jesse himself. It read, "Thorn and Jesse's Hearth." It's centered, Jesse said, leaning out of his truck with a grin. I checked it with the level 3 times. It's perfect, I said, walking over to him. The bakery smelled like cinnamon, yeast, and a future I had fought to reclaim. I had lost a husband, but I had gained my life back. And as Jesse climbed out of the truck and took my hand, I realized that some things are worth the fire, as long as you're standing next to someone who knows how to put it out. Ready to open, Dr. Thorne? Jesse teased, using the name from my dream of another life. I'm ready, I said. I unlocked the door, the bell chiming a clear, bright note. The air was clean, the flour was fresh, and the monsters were finally gone. The sweetest revenge wasn't the prison sentence. It was the fact that I was still here, and I was finally happy.